Hello, Martin from Gemini Connect here, and I have here with me the Nikon Z7. And maybe you guys don't know, but before I shot Fujifilm, which is what you see on our channel, I was a Nikon shooter, and I had one up until 2016 actually, but that was my third one. So I had 3 Nikons before I ever had a Fujifilm, and the last one was the full frame D600. But before that I had 2 cropped Nikons as well. And when Nikon released their mirrorless, I was excited because it looked really good on paper. So I finally got it here, I rented it, and I decided to give it a spin. Here's so far what my first impressions are, and number one is that it feels really good in your hands. This is a well-made body. It feels quite premium. The grip is good. I have enough space. The ergonomics are good. It does not feel cheap, and there's some rubber which is maybe not gonna last well in the long run, but for the sake of the grip it actually feels good. And all the rest of it, we'll see how it goes when I play with it more. I always liked the Nikon bodies, and as a continuation I went into Fujifilm, which also have very well made bodies, and because of that I am also pretty happy to see that this mirrorless is also quite well made. I did not at all find it cheaply made like I feel about Canons, and this is, by the way, I never used the Canon, because every time I picked it up it feels like a toy. This feels like a real camera, so that's a good thing. The next thing I want to say is that the usability on this is very close to what you get from your Nikon DSLRs. It's quite a bit of a continuation of the UX as well. The buttons are the same, the features are about the same. There are a few maybe differences, but if you have shot with a Nikon, you will be able to just pick this up and go, which is great because many Nikon DSLR users are looking for a mirrorless option, and this is the one for them. Nikon has made the choice to have a separate button for the shutter for still photography and another one to shoot video, which is kind of debatable these days which one is better, so I'll test it out and see how it goes. I like that it has a D-pad. You know, it has many of the natural controls that camera users are used to, and which is not the case with the Canon, by the way. Their big flagship mirrorless, the EOS R, was really difficult to use. They tried to change things around, and to me it was actually unusable almost. I got very frustrated with it. So Nikon doesn't do that. It doesn't frustrate you, it doesn't feel cheap. First of all, very good. And though many things are good, there are also some quirks. Together with the camera I rented the 24-70, which is a nice mid-range all-purpose lens. They only had the f4, so this is what I have here. I don't know if this lens is stabilized. There's no indication on it at all, so I'm testing the stability of video without knowing that. But the lens itself is decent, except it has rubber, which I don't very much like. It feels cheap, and it's plastic, but the shots coming out of it are sharp, and I don't see a problem with them. There's a strange thing they've done here where when you first start the camera, this lens will not work, and it tells you you have to pop the lens to be able to do anything. So you have to pop it forward like this, it clicks, and then you can focus or shoot, and that really slows you down when you're shooting. And I don't know why I did that. I've never seen any other lens. Perhaps it's because they don't want it sagging down as you're carrying your camera, as many lenses that have no locks do. So that's maybe why they chose it, but it slows me down. I don't like it so much. Some other interesting things on the body is that compared to my Fujifilm at least, it feels like you're missing certain buttons, like the shutter speed is hard to control. The aperture is over here on this dial. The ISO, you have to press this and then rotate this dial, so it's a combination. The exposure compensation, you have to hold this down and then rotate this dial. So overall you feel like you have less buttons, and that is not the case though. You don't have the way to control your focus mode and some other things that Fujifilm has very quickly at your fingertip. Things like continuous focus as well are on the Fuji body. But here you actually have many buttons here. You have zoom, and you have zoom out, and you have all these other buttons and information, and Over here you have 3 more, yet very important functions that you need for taking every shot that are not on the body. So when it comes to usability, it's still not as good as a Fujifilm after I have used one for years now. The next point is that after shooting with this for a while yesterday, I have to say I'm very impressed with the image quality. They have done a really good job. I primarily tested video but also photo, and what I saw is that the 4K is extremely sharp. It is not at all kind of a half-hearted effort. Nikon went into video big time and they delivered all the features almost. It does not have 10-bit and it does not have 60p, so that's where they still lag behind Fuji and Sony. But besides that, they have all the other features, including IBIS. So another thing is this camera is extremely stable. It's a V1 of this, and it's hard to get technology like stability right, but this one is very stable. When you hold steady like this especially and you don't move around, the shot is rock solid. You don't need to worry about it all to stabilize in post or anything like that. It has some kind of sport mode. I tried to walk with it, but it doesn't work as much. Maybe I need to turn the digital enhancement of the stability off, because there's in-body, which is mechanical, and there's also digital, which is just an algorithm, and it tries to stabilize it in post-production in the camera. So I tried a bunch of combinations and it looks very stable. However, it isn't yet there to be able to walk with it, so it's still behind the Panasonic GH5, but it's ahead of what we have in Sony's and what we have in Canon's, which doesn't even have IBIS really. It has stability in the lenses normally, and then it's probably on par with the Fujifilm X-H1. I can't say that one is much better than the other. They're about equal, which is, you know, both of them are the first time they've made IBIS, so that's really good. They're much more stable than some of their competitors. So you can shoot hardcore video with this, and especially what really makes this camera good and interesting to me is that it's a full frame camera. It's 46 megapixels, and you don't sacrifice any of the image quality in the darker time when my Fuji becomes useless. So this is really the best part of this camera that I found, is that you have the ability in a restaurant, in a hotel, where our Fuji really struggles indoors. Even the GoPro, you know, a lot of our cameras struggle, but this one looks great in those conditions. In the dark, it doesn't choke at all. The full frame really shines in that case. And knowing that it's full frame, it's also pretty impressive that they managed to stabilize it, because the harder the bigger the image and everything, the harder it is to stabilize. That's why GoPros are more stable, and that's why the Micro Four Thirds, like the Panasonic, is also easier to stabilize. But this is a full frame sensor and it's very stable, so that's a very good point as well. Overall I'm very impressed with it. I am glad that Nikon has managed to come back with a modern camera, modern technology, and catch up. I don't think their sales are quite there, but I hope more people wake up to the fact that this camera is indeed very good, and many DSLR Nikon shooters will be transitioning, which also means that they get to use their lens, because even though there are only 3 lenses for the Z mount that this camera has so far, we have the adapter, which allows you to adapt all the other Nikon lenses, at least until the replacements. They're bigger and so on than most mirrorless lenses, but you still have an option, and that is very good, because replacing all your lenses is something very expensive and takes a long time for the camera company itself to make the replacement lenses. So big win is that you can use that adapter. You're not totally starving for lenses like brand new systems are. Another really good thing about this camera being 46 megapixel full frame camera, which is on par with the Sony A7R III, is that it is giving you the same option as the Sony to go into crop mode, which in the case of the Nikon is called DX. And when you go into DX, you get the 1.5 or so crop, and therefore this mid-range lens becomes a zoom lens, and that is a huge benefit, because that means that with this 24 to 70, if you go into crop, the 70 is 1.5 multiplied, so you have over 100 millimeter zoom at that point, and yet the sensor is so big that you do not sacrifice your 4K quality at all. So you end up having your wide range 24, which is not cropped if you want it to be, so it's wide as you want it, and then on the farther range you can use the 70 and then apply the crop, and it gets over 100. So that is a much more flexibility you can get out of a single lens, and that is a very powerful feature as well. And so overall, I think this camera deserves a good review. There are just a few small things which I don't quite like about it, but as a whole, I think it's one of the better mirrorless cameras on the market right now. When it comes to image quality, straight out of the camera, I prefer what I'm seeing more so than Sony's. I still think Canon out of the camera looks better. I also think the Fuji looks better out of the camera, but the big caveat there is that as soon as you lose light, this Fuji becomes nearly or completely useless, while this camera and the rest of the full frame mirrorless continue shooting high quality in lower light conditions. I tested this over 6000 ISO, 6400. I did not see very much degradation, while at that point my Fujifilm becomes so useless that it's kind of unusable, and some photo shoots you just have to have a full frame mirrorless. If I was to pull the trigger and actually buy one, I would be very seriously looking at this one over the Nikons or the Canons, which either because of usability or the colors and so on, I don't like as much. This would be my second choice if I was in a Fuji shooter. See you next time.